Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 40, and it is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. If this is the first time you're joining the show, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you're returning from another episode or from some other content, glad to see you returning. So if you need to grab a snack or a drink or something to get you through the show, make sure you run and do that real quick before we get started. But for everybody else, let's go ahead and kick it off and switch to my screen. All right, so first article here, critical Netflix Genie bug opens big data orchestration to RCE. Critical vulnerability in the open source version of Netflix Genie job orchestration engine for big data applications gives remote attackers a way to potentially execute arbitrary code on systems running affected versions of the software. The bug, designated as CVE 2024-4701, carries a near max critical score of 9.9 out of 10. That's really high on the CVSS score, vulnerability severity scale. It attacks organizations running their own instance of Genie OSS using the underlying local file system to upload and store user-submitted file attachments. Organizations can use Genie to orchestrate, run, and monitor a variety of big data jobs and workflows across these different frameworks and across distributed computational clusters. So obviously a company like Netflix is definitely going to be dealing with a lot of data and large amounts of data. And so it makes sense that they would be using something that would assist them in that process. CVSS score of 9.9 is pretty substantial. As we said, it's out of 10. So this would definitely fall into that critical vulnerability category where you need to basically fix it pretty quick. Let's keep reading here. There's a quote. It says, if successful, such an attack would fool a web application into reading and consequently exposing the contents of files outside the document root directory of the application or the web server. So basically, when you have a web server and application, it considers a root directory. Think of this as like the folder on your system. So if you had an Apache folder, which is pretty typical, then that folder might be your root directory. So anything inside of that folder is what it is using for that application. And this is the idea that you could escape that process or escape that root folder and see outside of that, which is not supposed to happen, right? You don't want to allow access to the underlying system beyond that root folder. It says this also includes credentials for backend systems, application code, and data and sensitive operating system files. Again, because if you can escape that root directory, that folder, and you can access other things, then you could access the shadow file or whatever is on that actual system. My guess is they're running Linux. I doubt that they're running Windows for these systems, but you never know, I guess, right? Says Netflix has been using Genie internally for more than a decade. And that brings us to our next point here, is that when you start using software or applications or code or whatever the case is, if you use it long enough, it becomes a core part of your business and how you do things internally. So then the question becomes, well, what if it is something catastrophic? How do we shift away from that? One of the things that we see with software, not frequently, but we see it every once in a while, are different versions of software and applications. They become end of life or there is no more support for them. And then so if that is so ingrained in how you're doing things, how do you get away from that? What are the processes that you need to take to get away from that? Or if there is a significant vulnerability, for instance, in this case, that allows code execution or something like that, and you need to get away from it just in general because of that, then what do you do? So these are all important considerations, and these are things that you should be thinking ahead, not waiting till a decade passes and then all of a sudden it's kind of the rubber meets the road and you have to make that decision, but building up contingencies across as you go. So over time, what are contingencies if you had to, worst case scenario, get away from something? Typical business continuity, disaster recovery, all those things, because you want to be very careful about over reliance on certain software or certain applications, especially if it's something that may or may not be around. If you're dealing with Microsoft, obviously Microsoft Office is probably not going to go anywhere. It's been around for decades at this point. So, it's probably not going to go away, but you have lots of other kind of niche players that are creating software for IT management or cybersecurity or all of these things. And then you have to kind of think that through because those companies do sometimes, unfortunately, go end of life. So they completely go out of business or they just retire software or things that they had previously been doing. And then now you have to think about how to react to that. It says the vulnerability is present in Genie OSS versions prior to 4.3.18. Netflix has fixed the issue in Genie OSS version 4.3.18 and wants organizations to upgrade to the new version to mitigate risk. So, like a lot of things, new version comes out, just upgrade it, just update it, stop wasting time, and just update it.
Yes.
All right, let's keep moving here. Next article, LastPass is now encrypting URLs in password vaults for better security. LastPass announced it will start encrypting URLs stored in user vaults for enhanced privacy and protection against data breaches and unauthorized access. The vendor of the popular password manager also notes that this new security feature is a significant step towards reinforcing its commitment to implementing zero-knowledge architecture in the product, so it's not just to protect data from external threats. When users visit a website, it says LastPass compares the URL against an entry in the user's password vault to determine if they have stored credentials and then offers to enter them automatically. Pretty standard stuff as far as a password manager is concerned. LastPass says that due to restrictions in processing power in 2008, when the system was created, its engineers decided to leave those URLs unencrypted, lessening the strain on CPUs and minimizing the software's energy consumption footprint. And then it says basically computers have gotten better. So maybe that's not the thing that needs to happen anymore. It gives a quote. It says encrypting URLs associated with your accounts, just like every other private field in the LastPass vault, will expand our zero-knowledge architecture and enhance customer privacy, while also helping to further mitigate risk by ensuring that URLs related to specific services or accounts that are saved within the vault remain private. So this idea of zero-knowledge architecture is not brand new, but it is something that a lot of companies would like to have, especially if they are kind of a service provider or an application provider, whatever you want to call them, a software provider. Because when it comes to especially like privacy data or sensitive data, if they know about the data or they can see the data, they can view it, those kinds of things, then they're on the hook a little bit more. If the responsibility is more on the consumer, the customer, the end user, you, then it is not as much their obligation. They just have to make sure that the core system or the software, the service, that in itself is secure. And then they don't have to worry about the sensitive data because it's going to be protected. And so that's kind of the idea, especially with LastPass. They've had some controversies in the past, some examples of being breached. This article even says in 2022, which is kind of what I was alluding to, LastPass suffered 2 breaches that ultimately allowed threat actors to steal source code, customer data, and production backups, including encrypted password vaults. And that was a huge incident, a huge situation. If you don't know about that, because obviously at this point you were obviously alive at that point. But if you hadn't heard about that, that was a pretty massive incident as far as password vaults or password keeper applications are concerned. Had a lot of people talking about, well, should we switch password vaults? Should we go to something else? Because there obviously are other offerings that are out there. But one of the things with password vaults in general is this idea of more information. If the vault was able to get compromised, and it was and you were able to see more information as an attacker or all the information, then you can kind of start putting the pieces together as far as what you're going to go after next, and what these customers have access to, the types of phishing communication they can send. There's a whole bunch of issues around just being able to access more of that information. So it is nice to see that LastPass is starting to encrypt even a little bit more information, because think about that. As a password vault, so whatever password vault, because again, there's a whole bunch of them, those store a ton of information. They store a bunch of passwords, usernames, basically sensitive information that people need to get into their account. And then if they don't have two-factor authentication set up, well, that's even worse. Plus, a lot of these applications have the ability to do things like keeping notes or storing other things than just passwords. And certainly, if you're relying on that piece of software to store that securely, and then it gets breached and then an attacker can see it, well, that's just obviously a bad time. So it is good to see, again, that they are increasing what they are protecting. All right. And before we move on to the next article here, too, make sure that you check out cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. That's where you can find the article feed, all the articles we cover in all the episodes, as well as some other articles that are worth reading that we don't necessarily get to, but that is a very valuable resource as well. So next article here, London Drugs confirms ransomware as Lockbit demands $25 million. Canadian pharmacy chain London Drugs has confirmed that ransomware thugs stole some of its corporate files containing employee information and says it is unwilling and unable to pay ransom to these cyber criminals. In a statement to the Register, the British Columbia-based Biz described the April 28 intrusion, which it had previously called a cybersecurity incident, and that's in quotes, as an attack, and this is in quotes too, an attack orchestrated by a group of global cyber criminals. As previously stated, we have no, and this is a quote, as previously stated, we have no indication to date of any compromise of patient or customer databases, nor do our primary employee-specific databases appear compromised. Should this change as the investigation continues, we will notify affected individuals in accordance with privacy laws, the statement continued. So whenever you get breached as a company, whether you're London Drugs or whoever, how well can you kind of put the story together? How well could you identify it in the first place? But also, how well can you identify what they were able to access, how they are able to pivot through your network and through your storage devices, and all of those kinds of things? Because the better that you're able to put that together, the better you're able to improve your process overall, which we all know. And if you don't know, at the end of this process of incident response, there's a whole lessons learned process has to take place so that you can get better at doing your job and better at incident response, a better security program, and improving your processes and everything like that. So the better that you can do it, the better that that whole process operates, and long term, the better that you get. If you're not very good at that, well, then you're going to struggle at improving because you can't even do some of the more basic things as far as identifying these breaches and kind of putting the pieces back together. Because essentially that's what you do in incident response after you stop the attack and you start to recover everything. You have to kind of connect the dots. You have to do this investigation and understand what happened so that you can prevent it in the future, because you get tested again. Just because you get tested once, they're not going to go away. They're going to test you again for sure. Article also says ransomware crew Lockbit is claiming responsibility for the attack on Tuesday and alleged that London Drugs was willing to pay $8 million. The extortionists have demanded $25 million by Thursday and threatened to leak the stolen data if the pharmacy chain doesn't pay up. So they're saying they were willing to pay $8 million, but they want $25 million. And I don't know if that is, they're like, okay, we're just going to be, really firm here because you're saying you're going to pay $8 million and we're going to make you actually pay $25 million. We're going to squeeze a little bit more out of you because we know that's not that far off from what you're actually offering. So that is pretty interesting. Well, the company has notified all current employees and will provide them, here we go, 2 years of free credit monitoring and identity theft protection. It hasn't yet determined how much or what specific personal information was compromised. So they're still trying to figure it out, but they're going to give people 2 years of credit monitoring and identity monitoring. Nice. If you've heard me, that is, say this before, that's kind of a default in what companies are doing is offering 2 years of credit monitoring. It's fine. It's cool. 2 years. That'll be good, right? Next article, Lockbit takedown taking toll as gang plummets down rankings. Takedown of Lockbit in February is starting to bear fruit for rival gangs with Play overtaking it after an 8-month period of Lockbit topping the attack charts. So we've talked about the Lockbit takedown, so make sure you go back and look at that or continue to follow because we do talk about a lot of all these major current events that happen. For the first time since the National Crime Agency led takedown of Lockbit, the gang didn't register the most number of attacks across a single month, suggesting that law enforcement claims of a successful disruption were valid. So what a lot of law enforcement tries to do is they disrupt the activity. Findings from NCC Group published today also take into account the understanding that Lockbit had been reposting organizations it had attacked before the NCA's disruption operation to maintain appearances. So they are, in a sense, distributing propaganda or propaganda efforts to say, hey, we attacked these people. But in reality, it's just an old post that they're kind of refreshing, but making it look new. For example, the day before their lead suspect was unmasked, Lockbit's leak blog posted 43 supposedly new victims, many of which ransomware watchers had seen posted before. So they have been seen. They've been spotted. A Canadian university, a US healthcare business, and a UK software business were all previously claimed in December 2023. Now that's the interesting thing about the internet is that the information is out there. We can all see it. We can all note it, document it. And especially with these groups, these ransomware groups, you're kidding yourself if people aren't watching and monitoring what you're doing and what you're posting. They know. They know when you post this stuff because there's people that it's literally their job to watch this stuff. Global ransomware activity was down 15% month on month, but rose 1% year on year, a finding NCC Group believes is due to both the takedown of Lockbit in February and the increasing adoption of AI by cybercriminals. So we're seeing kind of a shift here in how things are happening and how frequently they're happening. Again, this is all stuff that is tracked over time. So that's how they are able to see, hey, this attack method went down or this attack method went up. Attackers are using this or they're going after this industry, these kinds of companies. So it is always interesting to see those trends because everything is in trends. We use trends to identify what we're most likely to get attacked by. So regional shifts, North America and Europe were unsurprisingly again the two most targeted continents by ransomware. It's very often the case given that most ransomware miscreants reside in countries that are adversaries to the leading economies in the West. Certainly the United States, or North America rather, and Europe are definitely two major players in the world economy. As such, 80% of all ransomware attacks target organizations across the two continents, but none more so than North America, which withstood 58% of the global total. Europe was targeted the second most with 35% of the global total, a 7% decrease month on month. So the better we get at defending ransomware and these attacks and going after these people that are doing it and taking them down, the better off that we will be. Of course, then new attacks will come up, but hey, at least we're stopping ransomware. Next article here, ARP-H pledges $50 million for hospital IT security auto patching.
Yes.
U.S. government's Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, ARPA-H, has pledged more than $50 million to fund the development of technology that aims to automate the process of securing hospital IT environments. The agency basically wants techies to get together and build a suite of software tools that can scan for vulnerabilities and weaknesses in hospital computer systems, and then automatically deploy patches for identified threats, developing and testing fixes and mitigations as needed. Modern medical facilities typically use a lot of internet or network connected devices, and taking these offline to patch or protect them can disrupt patient services. Not patching them, however, leaves clinics vulnerable to compromise. To accommodate these hospital-specific concerns, the upgrade, and that's what they're calling it, the upgrade platform will test software fixes in a model environment before deploying them with minimum interruption to the devices that need them if the plans come to fruition. So, one of the things that automatically comes to my mind here is auto patching. That sounds a little dangerous. Sounds like that there could be some issues with that. Now, we do see things like Windows patching and some of these other things that are pretty good at essentially auto patching, auto deployment of these patches. But even with something so good or so routine as Patch Tuesday, there are still issues that roll out with that. So again, this seems dangerous to me because with upgrades in general, you should be rolling them out in phases after you've tested them. But then we're talking about hospitals too. So we're talking about environments that are a little bit more sensitive than just a normal company. And then what kind of computer systems are we specifically talking about? Surely we're not talking about devices or anything like that that are running in there, which I've got news for you. A lot of those devices are running systems like Windows or Linux and things like that, where they have this underlying operating system that does have to be patched. And a lot of times that's where a lot of the vulnerabilities exist because those systems are not, they're not up to date on current patching because there's this large fear that especially critical systems, critical life-saving systems, all those kinds of things, but there's this fear that if those systems get updated or patched, that it's going to break them, and then now that hospital is out of that system is out of use for a hospital. So it's kind of this fine line with these systems in these hospitals and healthcare institutions. ARPA-H is a U.S. government funding agency that President Joe Biden created 2 years ago. It's tasked with making pivotal investments in breakthrough technologies that advantage medicine and healthcare, specifically technologies that cannot readily be accomplished through traditional research or commercial activity. And its director reports to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS Secretary. So, auto patching, I'm not sure. I feel like it's hard enough for us to get patching accomplished in normal environments where there isn't so much on the line. But I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because I think if something like this is successful, I think that could be something that could potentially roll out and improve other environments, other industries. Of course, it depends on what it looks like because, again, we do have certain systems and things out there that exist for patch management and to deploy some of these patches. But I think that'll be interesting to see. I mean, $50 million, I don't know, what the scale is they're necessarily looking at, because that certainly might not be enough money to do some wide scale stuff. It might be a lot of money. It might be an easy fix. Let's wait and see what happens. So with that being said, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. This is episode number 40. It's Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. I'm your host, John Good. Make sure to check out cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. You can find the article feed and all the articles that we cover, as well as some other articles that are worth reading, and as well as the platforms that we're on for this show. But with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap it up for today, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.